40F, 25M. Changes in relationship keeps disappearing. Is it possible that these are simply misunderstandings? I am a 40-year-old female, and he is a 25-year-old male, and I find myself in need of assistance. I don't have many people in my life, and those I do have are not the ones I can discuss this matter with. This message is going to be long, and I apologize for that in advance. However, I want to be as transparent and honest as possible in hopes that someone can offer me some guidance or at least a different viewpoint than the one my overactive mind tends to create. My thoughts have a tendency to bounce around erratically, so I apologize for any confusion in what I share. I met a remarkable man some time ago. He is not just any man. He is the most stunning individual I have ever encountered in every possible way. He compliments me in nearly every aspect, and it often feels as though we are two halves of the same person. He reflects my likes, dislikes, values, aspirations, essentially everything. His spirit is incredibly beautiful to me, and I find him absolutely handsome. I have no desire to look at anyone else. I have participated in relationships and have dated before, but I have not had the most favorable experiences in that regard. I tend to get hurt, leading me to leave. I have experienced enough to know that I no longer tolerate any nonsense. It took significant time to recover from past traumas, and for the last few years, I was doing quite well. I was not actively seeking a relationship and made this clear to everyone around me, as I have always felt better off on my own. Anyhow, I shared something on Reddit, which is how I met him online and established a connection. I was instinctively drawn to him, almost as if by a magnet. His message stood out amidst the 60 others I received. I did not engage with anyone else before or after him. For some unknown reason, I chose to open his message and communicate with him. We were both instantly captivated and shared a remarkable compatibility. Eventually, we moved our conversation to texting, where our connection flourished. The energy we shared was profoundly beautiful and uplifting. We were wonderful together, and he became everything I desired. We mutually wanted to be with one another. After some time communicating, we decided to meet in person. He mentioned that he had ample free time and could come to see me since we live approximately 45 to 55 minutes apart. Since we both enjoy driving, this wasn't an issue. We arranged to meet halfway, which amounted to about 30 minutes for each of us. Upon meeting, we grew closer. After a while, I suggested getting a hotel on his days off so we could spend time together and enjoy our first sleepover. He was thrilled, and we proceeded with the plan. Those 2 days were blissful. We engaged in everything together, maintaining physical contact throughout our time, and it was truly beautiful. Before departing, I inquired about what his family, specifically his grandmother whom he helps look after, believed about his whereabouts, to which he replied that he did not need to explain anything to anyone, adding that she already knew he was with me. We resumed our daily routines, but I found myself waiting for the next time we would see each other. Then various obstacles arose. His uncle fell ill, then he became unwell. Afterward, he began to recover. On his next days off, he took some family members out. When I asked about getting together, he mentioned that he still had phlegm and did not want me to get sick. I kept dropping hints, always anticipating another meeting. I brought up Valentine's Day a few times, thinking this is the one day of the year he will that can be dedicated to me. He assured me he would make the arrangements and requested my patience, which I granted. However, he was unexpectedly scheduled to work the second night, leaving us only able to connect on Valentine's Day. I felt a little disappointed, but resolved to manage. The evening prior, he informed me that he would come as early as possible in the morning because he was eager to see me, which made me extremely excited. On the day of our meeting, I learned that his sister was in town from out of state, which surprised me. I was aware of a family dinner on Sunday, but assumed she lived locally. He continued to text me, sharing that he was trying to extricate himself from the situation for hours. Ultimately, he expressed a desire to reschedule, explaining that his sister had planned this visit in advance and that he hadn't seen her in months. It felt as though I was being unreasonable for anticipating he would leave to meet me. I am unsure whether he had even made any tangible plans. I began to suspect that he never intended to see me. I was looking forward to our time together, and once again, I felt the sting of disappointment. Although Valentine's Day may seem trivial to some, if it weren't significant, He would have made an effort to see me rather than using his family as an excuse. I noticed the affectionate nicknames such as Queen and Baby had diminished, and he now only occasionally referred to me as Hun or Honey. He also remarked that he understood I was aware of his family-oriented nature when we first met. While he initially expressed a desire to build our life together, emphasizing that I was a crucial part of that vision and our future family, he now frequently insists on protecting and caring for me emotionally, pledging that I would never be hurt again under his care. Yet now, he seems to be retreating. A few weeks ago, I began to question our relationship. Most men typically share at least some information about their girlfriend with someone in their lives. He claimed he was private and that he did not owe anyone an explanation about his life. Previously, he had described me as his life and his everything, stating it should be that way. My questioning sparked some tension, leading him to vanish from communication. I attempted to reach out through texts and calls, but there was silence for days. One night, I called him, stating that I would be at our halfway point the following morning, pleading for a face-to-face conversation to discuss matters. He did not show up or respond. I continued to call and text, anxiously breaking down as I feared our relationship was over and that he was ghosting me. I implored him to come speak with me. After waiting at that park for 3 hours, he texted to say he wouldn't be coming and claimed that my urgency made him uncomfortable. He became defensive regarding my ghosting comment, stating he had taken time to think. Typically, when individuals need time, they announce their intent to avoid leaving their partner wondering why they disappeared. I asked him not to vanish again, and he insisted, "I'm not disappearing." That day became one of the worst of my life. I experienced a panic attack and ended up being physically ill, draining my battery and waiting 3 additional hours for roadside assistance. I spent 6 long hours in that park, completely falling apart. I have never been one to break down over men. I usually walk away from relationships or run away from them. Eventually, we managed to patch things up, and we returned to a semblance of normalcy. However, I continued to feel a sense of disconnect from him. I yearned for even the smallest bit of his time, often suggesting we meet halfway for an hour just to grab coffee. I missed the sweet promises made during our initial time together. I would have given anything for just 5 minutes to stare into his eyes so that I could truly perceive the reality of us and our situation. Unfortunately, I don't even have that. Then Valentine's Day unfolded as it did. He later returned to say that he believed I felt hidden because his grandmother was jealous and selfish and had negatively impacted his past relationships. He suggested that his life permitted no personal time. This insinuation felt like a reversal of what he had previously conveyed. I am left confused by the fragmented information he provides. Just hours before Valentine's Day, I heard from him around 7 p.m. He mentioned that his sister would assist him in resolving these issues, and when I inquired if it concerned his grandmother, he did not respond. I have not heard from him since. I am profoundly hurt. All I desire is time with my boyfriend. What has happened to him? Everything seems to have changed drastically, leaving me puzzled. I have fallen in love with this remarkable man, but I would rather he let me go if he does not share those feelings. I do not want to feel like he is stringing me along out of pity, particularly because of my past. In an ideal scenario, he would revert to being the person he once was. I want him to be the caring boyfriend he used to be. Yet, I am uncertain about how to navigate this situation. In all my years, I have never felt toward another person what I feel for him. I still conceptualize him as he was, and if this turmoil arises from misunderstandings linked to his family struggles, I do not want to walk away. I wish he had been upfront about everything from the beginning, just as I willingly revealed my insecurities to him, something I have never done with anyone else. I would have supported him, and together, we could have avoided much of this unnecessary drama. I genuinely envision a future with him. He has broached the subject of forever a few times, and I am still in agreement with that vision as long as he genuinely wants it too. This emotional pain is alien to me, and I struggle to process it. I am not accustomed to feeling this way. I am beginning to question whether I have merely become a game to him. I cannot tolerate mind games. He is unaware that I am currently across the country due to an emergency. I genuinely needed him to help me through something serious and not feel alone, but it seems the universe has conspired to make me navigate this alone, as I have always done. He expressed many beautiful sentiments, one of which was about never having to face life without support. I do not want a boyfriend who only communicates via text. There should not be any long-distance concerns, as we are less than an hour apart. How does someone transition from being willing to make the journey to see you at any time during their free hours to making excuses about long-distance issues and claiming they cannot see me? Why did he even pursue me in the first place? This has led me to contemplate that perhaps he is not genuinely interested in me. Alternatively, I might be misconstruing his intentions, perhaps hoping his grandmother wouldn't pose a problem. I am lost in thought and unsure of how to proceed. I cannot focus on anything and find myself crying unexpectedly, even having to conceal my tears from my daughter, as I do not wish for her to form negative impressions of him before she even meets him. I would sacrifice anything for a chance to sit down and have a direct conversation regarding everything and clarify where we stand, regardless of the outcome. I simply cannot endure this situation. However, I am reluctant to continue pursuing him when he chooses to ignore me and vanish. I refuse to engage in such games anymore, as they take me to dark places I do not want to revisit. However, my fear is that if I do not reach out and plead for him to communicate, similar to how I did before, I may never hear from him again, which makes me feel nauseated. I have attempted to be patient, yet he never explains his reasons for these disappearances. If he is genuinely grappling with personal challenges, he needs to determine whether I am important enough to fight for, or if he will allow his family to sabotage another relationship. At one moment, he is frantic about not wanting to lose me, and in the next, it feels as though he is indifferent. He claims that discussing his family would frighten me, but it would not. I am not easily scared away, yet he is putting our relationship at risk. All of these issues push me away further: his absence, his fluctuating stories, and my increasing emotional distress. As much as I desire him, I cannot remain if this situation does not improve. I am striving to be patient, hoping he is sincere in his feelings. On Valentine's Day, I asked him if he was in love with me, believing that clarity regarding his feelings would guide me in understanding whether he genuinely wanted to pursue this relationship. He did not respond. In a moment of frustration, I expressed via text, since that is our primary mode of communication, that I had fallen in love with him, but he ignored that as well. There is much more I would like to say to convey the entirety of this situation, but it feels overwhelming. All I want is for him to return to the person he once was, provided that version of him is authentic. If he is not genuine, I simply wish he would be honest with me. My mind is so convoluted and bewildered, I do not know what to think about anything anymore. If you choose to provide any insight or advice, please be respectful towards him. Despite how events have unfolded between us, I have deep feelings for this man and do not appreciate anyone vilifying him. I am not perfect and have made mistakes, particularly in trying to distance myself from him. Please, just show respect. Am I missing something or overreacting now that we are approaching 4 days of silence? Could he be attempting to gently distance himself from me? I would rather not walk away, but he is pushing me in that direction. I have never felt such deep emotions or connections with another person in a romantic context. I used to find it mildly irritating when men referred to a woman as a queen, yet I cherished being called that by him. I truly enjoyed being his queen and the delicate treasure he felt responsible for nurturing and protecting. That is how profoundly I have fallen for him. I feel utterly lost. I miss him and long to have him back in my life, my beautiful, sweet, loving man. Please offer any advice you can. I am open to all suggestions. It is possible that I have muddled the situation and that many misunderstandings exist. If that's the case, what should I do? I need to ensure he understands the need to stop these damaging behaviors, as we should be working together. Alternatively, perhaps I am simply a pathetic person who needs to return to what I am accustomed to being alone. Story 2. I slept with and dated someone with cerebral palsy, and now I feel I might be a terrible person. I was unsure how to encapsulate all of this in the title, but it's consuming me and hindering my ability to function throughout the day because I feel incredibly guilty, and I am at a loss for how to atone for this. I genuinely hope this post does not come across as ableist. I hold no animosity towards individuals with disabilities. I, 19 female, Began university in September. A guy, 19 male, from the accommodation Snapchat group chat I had joined prior to moving in started messaging me rather quickly after my arrival. I initially assumed he was just a guy seeking attention from girls in the accommodation. Regardless, we exchanged messages back and forth, albeit rather dryly. We weren't truly engaging in conversation, merely responding in a minimalistic manner. After I settled in, he began texting me 3 to 4 nights a week, asking if I wanted to go out with him or meet for a cigarette. I declined his invitations for a while, as I was usually with other people. However, one night about a month later, I found myself alone and feeling quite down. So when he asked if I wanted to share a smoke at 4 a.m., I agreed. He mentioned that he had just returned from a night out and was fairly intoxicated. We met outside and spoke for about 30 minutes. He was genuinely pleasant. We discussed our struggles with depression and obsessive-compulsive disorder. I discovered that he has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which led us into discussion about that topic as well. He mentioned he skateboards, which I found impressive. Overall, he came across as a really nice guy, but I wasn't physically attracted to him. Even though we shared similar struggles and he was quite good-looking, our sense of humor and musical preferences didn't align, which are important factors for me. He was very complimentary, saying I looked cute based on my Snapchat pictures and that I had a unique style. He was a bit physically forward, but I chose to overlook that. I noticed he was slurring his speech slightly, but I assumed that was due to his drunken state. When it came time to head back to our respective rooms, he was limping, which I attributed to the same reason. He invited me to his room, but I declined, stating I was tired, and I genuinely didn't want him to make an advance toward me, so I returned to my own room. The next time we saw each other was on a night out, a week or two later. I was with a friend, and he was with his friends. A few hours into our night, we crossed paths because the initial plan had been for me to join him for the outing, but I had first asked my friend to accompany me since I was anxious about meeting someone I hardly knew in a club setting. We all enjoyed the club and were having a great time. He continued to be incredibly flattering. I ended up grabbing McDonald's and taking an Uber back to his place, where he invited me to his room to eat. We did that, and I ended up sleeping next to him, although nothing sexual occurred. When I woke up, he was already up making coffee. It dawned on me that he had a limp and was speaking similarly to how he had the previous time we met, and I realized he had cerebral palsy. At that moment, I didn't give it much thought. We chatted, had breakfast, and then I returned to my room. A week later, I went to a pub quiz with my flatmate and her friends from her course, assuming we would go clubbing afterwards since it was Halloween. However, after finishing the quiz, I discovered they were not going clubbing and were instead headed back to one of their accommodations for a movie night, inviting me to join if I wished. This may sound selfish, but I was really in the mood for clubbing, having picked out my costume and feeling somewhat awkward about going to their place since they all knew each other well, but I did not. So, I politely declined, explaining that I intended to go clubbing instead, and I reached out to all my friends to see who was going out. It turned out that only this guy wanted to go out at that moment, and he was about to head out with his friends. He suggested we meet outside the pub, and I figured, why not, so I agreed. We went clubbing, got extremely intoxicated, and when the night ended, I returned to his place, and we engaged in sexual activity. This was a poor decision, and I acknowledge that it was entirely my fault, as I should have realized from his excessive flattery that he was interested in me for more than just a casual encounter. Upon waking up, we had a general conversation about our night out and his friends. Eventually, we touched on the subject of sex. He started flattering me again, mentioning that every time he had been intimate with a girl, she had ghosted him afterward, which had affected his emotions in the past. However, he felt I had a nice personality and was laid back, assuring him I wouldn't do that to him. He was correct. I would never ghost someone I'd just been intimate with unless it was non-consensual, which has occurred to me before. I hugged him and expressed my sympathy about his previous experiences, but I also made it clear that I wasn't looking for a romantic relationship at that time and just wanted to enjoy my freedom. He responded with an, "Oh, okay," and made a lighthearted comment about being jealous of the other guys I could potentially sleep with. I laughed along, even though I was very apologetic, despite him not explicitly indicating he wanted a relationship. I returned to my own room. Then began a 2-week barrage of text messages from him asking, "Do you want to date me?" And, "Why would you sleep with me if you don't want to date?" I attempted every possible way to gently convey my disinterest, with the penultimate message being a straightforward rejection, stating I had told him no and why several times. I expressed that I would rather we remained friends, or if that was too much, perhaps we shouldn't communicate for a while, or at all words to that effect. The latter question seemed to pertain to our sexual encounter, and I hadn't expected that since we had identical body counts, a term I dislike, and had not dated anyone in between. Naturally, I profusely apologized, explaining that I had not realized our encounter was something more significant for him, and I felt genuinely awful for leading him on due to my own irresponsibility. Given his OCD, he was constantly apologizing, explaining his obsession with feeling flawed and compelled to apologize. I reassured him that he hadn't done anything wrong. My reluctance to date was simply about my own readiness and the fact that we didn't connect in that particular way. I initially assumed his repetitive questioning stemmed from a checking compulsion, but now I question whether he truly didn't understand that I was not interested in a romantic relationship, despite my numerous rejections. Eventually, he ceased asking for some time. In December, he invited me to a Christmas fair that had popped up in our city for the winter, and I agreed because I wanted to go. We made plans for which night to go and expressed our excitement for the Christmas fair food. Toward the end of that conversation, he asked, "So it's a date?" I should have firmly shut him down at that moment, and I genuinely cannot understand why I didn't. I think it was a combination of his persistent requests to date and his apologetic demeanor. Whenever I rejected him, he would deprecate himself, and I would console him, assuring him that he hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't want to undo the planning and excitement we had shared, so I reluctantly responded with, "I guess so." I thought, "It's just one date, it will be fine. I can do this as a way of showing I've made an effort," convincing myself I should be interested in him, despite recognizing that we didn't connect personally. As a result, I decided to go on the date. This was a poor decision. To him, one date seemed to imply we were officially dating. I discovered this once we returned home after the outing, where he cupped my face and remarked, "I can't believe I'm dating such an incredible woman." Oh no. What have I done? I knew I should have corrected him right then and there, but cowardice held me back. I couldn't reject him again, not to his face, especially not to someone who had been so kind to me and had faced considerable hardships in the past. I convinced myself I was ableist and a terrible person for not being attracted to him when our personalities and musical tastes did not line up, which I realized more as I spent time with him. He informed all his friends, parents, and sister about me, whereas I didn't share anything with anyone. We spent a lot of time together. I visited him almost every day, and we would frequently go out for midnight snacks and wine, which was genuinely enjoyable. However, I just didn't love him. I maintained the facade long enough to avoid hurting his feelings, which lasted about 2 weeks since I couldn't bear the thought of keeping things going when I knew I lacked love for him. We went on another date, a double date with a couple he was friends with, which was also delightful. They were incredibly nice as well. However, I still could not develop feelings for this guy beyond friendship. A week into this, I confided in one of my female flatmates, overwhelmed by my situation, and sought her advice because I was waking up and going to bed each night feeling emotionally trapped. However, I didn't mention his cerebral palsy to her because I feared she might think I had used him for sex and would be dumping him due to his condition. That reasoning is utterly false, as I had previously explained to her and every friend I've confided in that it was because we simply didn't have the same connection as he believed we did. Our humor and personalities didn't mesh well, which is the honest truth. If I reveal his cerebral palsy, they'd likely connect that to my discomfort in dating him, which has plagued my mind, making me feel guilty. It doesn't make sense, because why would I trap myself in a situation where I share a relationship with someone for whom I feel little attraction or affection? I could have just pursued someone I was more attracted to instead. Despite only having sex with him 2 additional times during our brief dating period, I still feel like I've used him. When I decided to end things, I chose to do so over the phone since texting felt inappropriate. However, I felt incapable of meeting him in person to break the news. Initially, he reacted quite calmly, merely responding with an, "Oh, okay," only to launch into another 2-week barrage of messages, apologizing for not being good enough and questioning why he wasn't sufficient for me. I should note that things progressed rapidly during those 2 weeks. He had mentioned that I could spend Christmas with his family and even suggested a trip to Amsterdam now that flight tickets were affordable, after I casually mentioned my interest in visiting. It was an incredibly stressful experience, but I had given my consent, so I couldn't truly be upset about it. The fact that he has cerebral palsy is a detail I have withheld when discussing this with my friends, and I feel tremendous guilt for doing so. I'm unsure if I should even disclose that he has cerebral palsy because bringing it up out of the blue might seem ableist. I just feel like a terrible person and quite promiscuous as well. I still send him the occasional Snapchat so as not to ghost him, though my responses are infrequent and rather flat, as I do not want him to become attached once again. A couple of weeks ago, he sent me a Snapchat of himself in bed with another girl, and I found myself unsure how to interpret that. I hung out with him once a few weeks after our breakup, but I have since decided against meeting up again, fearing he might misinterpret our interactions as more significant than they truly are, just hanging out. I feel deeply remorseful, but there's not much more I can say. I feel terrible for not informing my friends that he has cerebral palsy, even though it isn't the reason for his behavior, at least in my understanding of the condition. Yet I worry they might assume that's why I was reluctant to pursue a relationship with him. Honestly, my biggest concern is that if I disclose this information, they might think his cerebral palsy affects his ability to consent or anything akin to that, which is absurd because he is essentially just an ordinary functioning individual with a minor physical disability. Still, this thought plagues me, and I feel guilt because what if his condition indeed impacts his ability to consent to sexual activity, and his incessant questioning and apologizing stemmed from more than just his obsessive-compulsive disorder? Even though I know he has OCD, which can cause such behaviors, I can't help but worry that he genuinely doesn't understand. Expressing this concern makes me feel ableist. I am incredibly frustrated with myself and perceive myself as the most despicable person in existence, compelling me to share this burden. Please feel free to tell me to end my life. I'm open to that. This has consumed my thoughts for 2 months straight. I apologize for this lengthy rant. Edit. Hello. The responses to this post have been very kind, but after reviewing both the post and the responses, I feel the need to clarify that it has read too much like self-preservation compared to how I truly feel about this situation. I had discussed him with my friends prior to dating him, mentioning that he was sweet, while also joking about him being overly touchy-feely at times and criticizing his poor taste in music. I had even acknowledged that he had a crush on me, an important detail I neglected to mention, so please do not view me as some kind-hearted person. I should have accepted that he had a crush on me instead of merely entertaining the thought, as this may have prevented me from sleeping with him. I was intoxicated when we were intimate, but that still serves as a poor choice on my part. Ultimately, I led him on. Furthermore, after I initially rejected him a couple of times, I occasionally said, "I don't know," in response to his inquiries about dating to avoid continually rejecting him, which I completely forgot to disclose and is another critical point I must address. Story 3. Just venting. This will be a lengthy message, so brace yourself. In summary, my boyfriend acted suspiciously in the past. We have moved beyond that, but I am uncertain about how to handle the situation with another woman. Additionally, I am not seeking comments like, "Your boyfriend is a jerk, break up with him." If you choose to share such opinions anyway, feel free, but we will just be wasting each other's time. I have known my current boyfriend since 2022. We met on a dating application, which is hardly surprising, and neither of us was interested in anything beyond a casual encounter. However, our chemistry was undeniable, and we quickly connected. We could talk for hours, and eventually I developed feelings for him. While I am not proud to admit it, we went through a back-and-forth situationship for over a year. He was reluctant to enter a committed relationship, but insisted he did not want to lose me. I like to think I was resolute and attempted to end things, but he would always come back after 2 or 3 weeks with grand gestures, claiming he was getting there and loved the idea of being with me but required more time. I know, it makes me cringe just recalling it. Fast forward to the summer of 2023, when he finally expressed a desire to be exclusive. During this period, I was not introduced to his friends or family and was hardly featured on his social media. However, we took trips together and engaged in more couple-like activities, and I felt happy, believing this was a step in the right direction. One day, I inquired about a girl who had been commenting on his Instagram. I found her flirty tone inappropriate, given that he had a girlfriend. He quickly dismissed it, saying it was nothing, that she lived in another country, that it was just a joke, and that I should not worry. A few months later, he surprised me with a short trip abroad, and I was overjoyed. It would be our first time spending extended time together, and I genuinely thought it was a positive sign of improvement in our relationship. During our trip, we got along beautifully and had a fantastic holiday. 4 weeks after returning home, however, he abruptly ended things. He claimed that he still was not ready for a relationship, as he had been saying since 2022, but expressed profound feelings for me and wanted to give us a chance. Nevertheless, his heart just wasn't in it. I was devastated, but I put on a brave face as my birthday approached. He contacted me days later, checking in and expressing that he was thinking about me. I thanked him for his concern and assured him I was fine but did not initiate any conversations. I spent days crying in bed, but I wasn't about to let him know that. 3 weeks later, he was abroad visiting the woman he had insisted was not an issue. I confronted him, and he claimed it was merely a coincidence, assuring me that nothing had transpired between them during our relationship and urging me to accept that he did not want to be with me. Fine. Whatever. I mentally labeled him with unflattering terms and tried to move on for good. However, a few days later, he reached out to express regret about his actions and admitted he missed me. I remained resolute, ignoring his message, unlike how I had in the past. Christmas came and went, and he consistently messaged me, wishing me well and expressing that he missed me while trying to flirt. Sometimes I engaged, and sometimes I did not. Occasionally, we even slept together. I am human, after all. Eventually, I informed him that I could not return to a situationship and that he needed to leave me alone. After 2 weeks of silence, he showed up at my house, declaring how happy I made him and expressing a desire not to lose me. I stood my ground, blocked him on social media, and changed my number. I moved forward. He would occasionally call from different numbers to chat and catch up. Eventually, he convinced me to unblock his number, arguing that even if we were not together, we could be civil, as we meant a lot to each other and should keep in touch occasionally. 2 months later, he returned, proclaiming his love for me, expressing that he missed me and wanting to try again. I'll admit I faltered. I wanted this. I didn't just passively acquiesce. We addressed many issues, taking months to talk, argue, and clear the air. I explained what a relationship would entail going forward, emphasizing that I would not tolerate the previous half-heartedness. To his credit, he has been wonderful ever since. Our relationship now is fantastic and vastly different from what it was in 2023. He is thoughtful and respectful. We know each other's friends and families, and our lives are intertwined in ways they hadn't been before, and I am genuinely happy. He describes it as though a switch flipped in his mind, and he realized that I was what he wanted. It may sound cliched, and I acknowledge he behaved poorly in the past, but honestly, the last 8 or 9 months have been the happiest and most loving relationship I have ever experienced. However, I recently discovered, through my own research, that during our previous relationship in 2023, he was not the bastion of loyalty he claims to be. I know that an emotional affair with the other woman occurred long before our breakup. I believe he ended things to be free to visit her and engage with her without her discovering my existence. I have become obsessive about this, and insecurities regarding this other woman plague my thoughts. It feels as though it just happened yesterday rather than over a year ago. I confronted him about this recently and made it clear that he was to have no further contact with her. While I recognize that any messages exchanged have been innocent, friendly, and her reaching out to him, I insisted it must come to an end out of respect for me. He understands this. She is aware that he has a girlfriend. I am prominently featured on his social media now, and he even informed her he was in a relationship in his last message to her, and he has blocked her. I have checked his account several times since, and she remains blocked with no further contact. My dilemma is that part of me really wants to reach out to her and share everything that transpired. She is unaware of my existence and did not know he was in a relationship the entire time. Now that she has been blocked, she may not understand why. I am torn between wanting to inform her and questioning whether this desire stems from a vindictive impulsiveness. I do not wish to hurt her unnecessarily as I have been hurt. I understand that none of this is her fault, it is his. However, part of me feels that I am tired of him always coming out of every situation without consequence, and that the women he has involved should be made aware of his actions.